You know, 2 weeks ago, I was shopping for a new bag. And my other one, you know, we have to bagarize and get exactly the right size for each device and type of thing, right? We all understand that. And I was with my son, Travis, who is actually working in China right now, where he grew up most of his life. And we were in a local mall here, and we were interacting with the saleswoman, who was very delightful. Her name was Melissa. She's Hispanic, and we were talking, and she said, well, why do you need a new bag? Because I walked in, and I said, this is the bag I need. And she said, how do you know? You haven't tried them all. I said, I've been doing research for 2 years. This is exactly the size I need, exactly what I need. And she said, great. She said, what do you do? I said, travel, probably 90, 100 nights a year around the world, and so I know the kind of bag I need. What do you do? I said, well, I help people know and follow Jesus Christ. And she looked at me, and you could tell there was an interest level. And I said, does that interest you at all? And we got into this 20-minute conversation in the store, and I pulled out my iPhone, and I said, well, let me show you something. I opened up God Tools, which is an app that hasn't been updated for a couple of years, but it still works. And we walked through a presentation of the gospel using the God Tools app, and she prayed on the spot and received Christ in the store. And I was with my son, and we were just doing this together, and after the first, it's 4 spiritual laws, basically, and I handed her after the first law, and I was asking her, you know, why do you think this is? And she said, I don't know. How do you do this? And I said, just swipe. So she swiped, walked through the rest of the app by herself, and her friend came over who worked with her, and she's listening in on this conversation for a few minutes. And they look down, they go, this is an app? And so Melissa's showing her friend, you know, sharing the non-Christian sharing the gospel with her non-Christian friend. And it was just so sweet to see. And when we got to the end, my son Travis led her through a prayer to ask her, you know, to invite Christ to take control of her life. And after she prayed, and I had her tap the app where she can just email herself the link, because she said, I have a Muslim boyfriend, and I need to talk to him about this. I was like, that's a great idea. Let's, you know, we'll follow up with you. And so now she's resourced. She has that. And as we were leaving, my son Travis looked at me and said, Dad, that, you know, she really understood this better. And she said, I think part of it was because the credibility by having it in a tool in her language, not in her physical, you know, her spoken language per se, but in her cultural language. She gets phones. And so she could relate with that, and there was a credibility aspect that came with being on the cutting edge of technology, and it ministered to her, and God used it. And most of us in here have either experienced something like that, or we want to experience more of stuff like that, which is why we're here. Clyde, I love you, the way you shared the vision for this, and it's a privilege for me to be here with you. I come as a fellow learner. Crew has had a global digital strategies team full-time since April 1st of this year. So we are just getting on board and learning about this. And some of what I'm going to share with you tonight is the journey we've been on in learning and learning what we don't know. This is where you can find stuff about me. I tweet, I blog. I'm an author, just published a book called Close, Leading Well Across Distance and Cultures. So if that's your thing and you're interested in that, feel free to check that out. And I came to Christ when I was 10 years old through a felt board. Who remembers felt boards? Okay. Yeah, you know, the heart, the door handle's only on one side. Jesus is knocking, will you open the door? And, you know, that, as a 10-year-old kid, that made sense to me. I don't know that that would be that effective for me or my kids today. And so as we think about Gutenberg 500 years ago, totally disruptive technology with the printing press, people who were scribes and had patron families who paid them exorbitant sums to hand copy books went out of business in 20 years. Because they were in the hand copying business, not the information sharing business. And then it was another long 450 years until Marconi and the radio, right? And then soon after that came television. And then shortly after that became mass media. And then the internet, thanks to Al Gore. And then social media. And it's accelerating more and more and more. And it's hard to stay up to speed with all this stuff. But I believe it's part of God's vision. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a minute. Think about your last 12 hours. Think about what you've done with this. What have you done with this? You've texted. What else? Email. Facebook. Anybody use a map to get here? Anybody fly? Did you book your flight or change a seat or check in with the little QR code swipe? What else did you do? Did you Skype a loved one, huh? Banking? Alarm? You used it as a phone. How innovative. Anybody read the Word of God on this? I just finished, I decided, hey, as VP of Digital Strategies, I need to live the brand. So I just finished January through November 30th, read the entire scripture on my device. Thought, I'm just going to figure, I'm going to eat the dog food, see how it goes. And, and it was great. And I realized there were times, I also listened to it. So sometimes I read it, sometimes listening to it. But I remember I was out in my garage listening when it was going through 1st and 2nd Samuel. And as I was listening to the story of David and Goliath, it was like listening to the radio. And I thought, if this were a broadcast, I was finding myself, I was working on a project, and I was going, wow, no way. I was saying that to myself. There's no one else around. And I thought, that's so exciting. It's like sometimes we just, when it comes to us in a new way, in a new media form, it's different. And it captivates us. The stories of God and of the faithful saints through the years, it captivates us in a different way. At no time in these last 12 hours, my guess, did you ever think, I am leaving my real life and I'm stepping over into my virtual life to do some virtual things, and now I'm going to step back into my real life? Did anyone ever think that? So this whole idea, this notion that there's virtual ministry and real ministry has disappeared in the last 18 months. We used to call it virtual ministry in Crew. We don't use that term anymore because people are thinking, well, it's not real, it's virtual. It's very real. I have a friend serving in the Middle East. He has seen people come to faith, Arab, Muslim background, that he has personally followed up and discipled through Skypleship for 4 years before meeting them face to face. That's very real ministry, friends. Here's some of the things that go on in 60 seconds online. I'll just let you look at some of those numbers. No, I won't. Fuse has changed its mind. All right. Well, 60% of online devices, according to a report that came out last month from Business Intelligence, 60% of online devices are now smartphones or tablets. So I don't know where that line is you were talking about crossing in the future, but it's pretty close to now. And for us in Crew, as we're thinking about this, let's see if we can get there. Thank you. We have realized that as a global organization that touches nearly 200 countries and a 60-year-old ministry history, we have become quite, in many pockets of the world, we are on the cutting edge of innovation, and in many places we are just entrenched in the past. And it doesn't make sense. Some places that you'd think would be the most developed are the most entrenched, and vice versa. And actually, some of the countries where they haven't had the technology and the money are the most nimble and flexible to move us forward. And so in the last 3 months, 4 months, as we were seeking the Lord, we have devised kind of our global strategy is what we call indigenous. And I'm sharing this with you just to kind of tell you where we are. It's a combination of indigenous and digital, realizing that there isn't going to be one big strategy. There's not one site to rule them all and in the darkness bind them. Those days are passé, because in 3 of the 6 continents, there are more mobile subscriptions currently active than there are members of the population. And so it models the postmodern culture of fragmentation, deconstruction, and everyone concerned about their own personal story. And so how do we connect the narrative of their own personal story to a 2,000-year-old story? In a confetti culture that's just filled with feeds, just constantly going by, and you wonder, where was that? And you can't even find it. To root people and ground them in something with the gravitas of our faith. That's a challenge. And we've realized that in order to do that, we're not going to be able to create stuff in English and try to translate it. We just need to go indigenous from the very beginning. And so that's really, it's a great cost model, because it's in many cases, the stories I could tell and many of us in the room could tell, people... I know in one war-torn country in the Mideast, I met this young gal, 23 years old. She just finished our basic training. She didn't have any organizational resources to speak of, and she was watching children who were traumatized because their parents were coming home without a limb, or sometimes not coming home at all because of the war. And the children were freaking out and afraid. And she said, I need to tell them that Jesus will be there for them tomorrow, even if their family won't be. And so she created a Facebook group in this language that targeted people that were 7 to 17 years old. And she reached out to them, and she began just posting one positive picture about Jesus per day and saying, Jesus knows you, he cares about you, he will always be there for you. And eventually she invited them to come to a Bible study at a location. 52 kids came, and half of them trusted Christ. The cost to the organization? 0. That's what indigenous is all about. So why indigenous? Why did we decide to go this direction? You guys can help me out. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. This isn't working, so just follow with me. In a conference like this, you'd think the tech would work flawlessly. Because of God, his heart, his glory, and his promises. This is where we start. I wish I could share with you in detail the birth of the vision that God has taken me from sitting in a meeting in South Africa in January, listening to 6 men who really ran all of the internet stuff for sub-Saharan Africa for about 50 nations in our movement, working hard, 30,000 emails on the 180-day response queue. We were 6 months behind in responding. We just couldn't keep up. And so we've got to find a different way to crowdsource response to the Great Commission, which is one of the things we're working on right now. From that trip, I flew from Cape Town to Thailand, and I was in an emerging leader training with about 25 of our East Asian staff, people that serve in a highly persecuted environment every day. Top leaders, young, sharp, all of them are using digital technology. But the training that we have for our new staff still teaches people to use printed 4 spiritual laws to go out and hand them to people. And none of these people interact that way with their friends. They're all urban. They all use social media, which now has like 350 million people on it and the social network that they're using by choice in the country. And it's like, we're missing something here. And then I participated in September in a digital strategies conference it was a secular conference in San Francisco, about 300 attendees. We had about 10 people from Crew. We met one other believer at the conference for 2 days. And we heard stories of, or just the taxonomy of how we're breaking down the new strategy needs social marketing, social media marketing, digital branding, UX, UI, predictive analytics, process digitization, and I could go on and on. Data privacy. Well, there's nothing in our organization that is organized that way. We're organized like any standard organization's been organized for the last 50 years in the industrial age. We've got IT, we've got operations, we've got finance, we've got field strategy, we've got leadership development, HR, yada, yada. Well, digital cuts across everything in a completely different angle. And in digital, it all comes crashing together. And so for a user online, whether this is a non-believer looking for something about God, whether this is a young believer looking for follow-up, whether it's somebody who's been a disciple and looking for a way, content to share with a neighbor that lives next door but doesn't speak their language, or whether it is simply somebody that wants more information about our organization, they don't care how we're organized. If they can't find what they're looking for in 15 to 30 seconds on this, we are irrelevant and invisible to them, period. So I'm on the flight coming back from San Francisco, and I'm thinking through all this. I'm reviewing my notes. I'm totally overwhelmed. I've listened to the CEO of Levi's, Harvard Business School, Harvard Law School. All these people talk about how far they are behind. I listened to the 39-year-old director of digital strategies for Dell Computer, who Michael Dell called into his office personally and said, here's $20 million in 3 years. We need a digital strategy because we don't have one. And we're one of the largest computer companies in the world. And he hired 130 people his first year on the job. And he didn't know what he was doing. That made me feel a little better. I hope that makes you feel a little better. So this is why we're going with indigenous from the very beginning. And when it comes to God, His heart, His glory, and His promises, the thing that He's ministered to me from an obscure 2,700-year-old prophetic voice in the voice of Habakkuk. This was if you remember, Habakkuk was complaining to the Lord about another culture that seemed that it was unrighteous, but God was using. And God said, I hear your complaint, but listen up. I'm doing something in the world you wouldn't believe. I'm paving the roads through pagan culture to glorify my name. And he said, write the vision, make it plain on tablets, that the one who reads it may run. For the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. Brothers and sisters, we are in times that are accelerating, I believe, toward this vision. The technology is just paving the way. We don't have to build Christian highways to drive Christian cars on in real life. And we don't have to build all the highways. Google, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, they're building the highways for us, and they're upgrading them at $1 million a week. So we don't have to. We have to learn how to drive on those roads and use the gospel there. So the second reason why indigenous, because of God's call. We are missionaries. What do missionaries do? They go where the people are. They go into the missional green space. They go where the gospel isn't. Where are people today? They are online, they are digital, they are mobile. And we've already heard about that, so I won't belabor that. We just did a global religion survey. We asked 941 people in 21 nations 4 questions. Because our vision and Crew is is to see the gospel permeated around the world in such a level that everyone would know someone that truly follows Jesus. So they're one link away. And we believe that these 4 questions were getting at the root of that. They are, do you know someone who tells other people about Jesus Christ? Does this person show compassion and love toward other people? Does this person appear to love Jesus and obey Jesus? And does the life of this person appear to be different because of Jesus? And if someone could answer yes to those 4, we felt like it's a good bet that they know somebody who truly follows Jesus. Here's what we found. By continent. Africa was the highest at 59%. You see kind of moving Asia, South America in the 50s, a little bit lower North America, Australia at 42%, Europe 29%. Globally, 51% knew someone who truly followed Jesus, which means 49% means that somebody doesn't. So we got a lot of work to do. So we got 2 days to figure that out. Annual mobile ad spending per mobile subscription, and I'll just blow through this, but basically between 2011 and 2012, it tripled or doubled on every continent in the world in 1 year, mobile ad spending, except for Asia Pacific. There's 7 billion people in the world, 5 billion we believe are unchurched, 49% of whom do not know a true follower of Jesus Christ. Campus Crusade for Christ International and crew are trusting God for 10 million engaged, multiplying disciples by 2020. The harvest is plentiful, the laborers are few, and that's why we're going indigenous. Because our current rate, there's no way any of our current strategies, even if we had a 5 to 10% increase per year, it'd be 10,000 years till we're done. Third, cultures. One size does not fit all. In Paul's missional strategy 2,000 years ago, it's the same approach today. Rapid appointment of indigenous leaders in each location minimize cultural friction by ensuring that qualified, accepted insiders handle the primary functions of leadership. And that strategy greatly increased Paul's capacity to influence hundreds and thousands rather than merely tens and fifties. Finally, indigenous, it's because of you. You know the best approaches, you know the best people to get at language issues. If you don't know it, you know somebody who does. And I appreciate Clyde and Brian's vision for this. That's what these 2 days are about, is gathering together and making those connections. Because there isn't going to be one approach, tool, site, app, video, or link that connects 5 billion hearts to Jesus Christ. God calls you to reach the culture He's called you to reach. In the Christian faith, what Jesus has called us to do, He hasn't called us to make phones and technology. He hasn't called us to build apps and websites. He's called us to do one thing, to make disciples. Let's keep that in mind and not let the tech get before the horse. Can we do that? My prayer for us this week is that we would run. Thank you.